Andrew Carnegie, industrialist, philanthropist, benefactor, was not only one of the pioneers in the rise of American industry, but established the idea of social responsibility for men of wealth. He was born in Dunfermline, Scotland in 1835. His father, William, was a weaver who specialized in the fine damask for which the town was world famous, while his mother, Margaret, was a niece of the town radical.
William, we must move to America.
Now, Margaret, are we going to argue again? I'm a skilled man. This machine craze is just temporary. They'll be needing me, and I'll be able to weave for a profit once more.
Nonsense. There's no place for your skill in Scotland. My sister in America writes there's work for you there.
But, Mother, don't mean we should leave Dunfermline, do you? Why, Robert Bruce is buried here, and Wallace and Mary of Scotland were both here, and Pittencrieff Glen and High Street and the bells in the Abbey.
We have to make a living, Andrew.
We'll do all right as soon as these machines are proved useless.
William, I've already borrowed the money for the passage.
What?
We're going to America, Uncle Lauder. We're going on a big ship. We'll all have jobs and be rich someday.
Andy, you get too enthusiastic too fast.
But we are going. Mother said so. And there'll be no lords or others to keep us out of the park. And if you don't come along, Uncle Lauder, I'll make a lot of money and send for you.
Ah, young Andrew, there's the acquisitive nature of yours talking again. Money will come to you. Of that I've no doubt. But dinna forget all I've taught you. If you forget Robert Burns and Shakespeare, the money you pile up will mean nothing to you. Wealth brings a great responsibility, lad. Dinna ever forget that.
I won't. And with the money I'll make, I'll buy a whole set of Shakespeare's. Tom! We're going to America, Tom. We're going to America.
It was not long before the Carnegie family found itself settled in Allegheny, Pennsylvania. There, Andy took a job in a cotton factory as a bobbin boy. Although he was soon promoted to a furnace tender and spindle finisher at $1.65 a week, he was not satisfied, and he got a position as a messenger for the telegraph company.
Are you fooling around with my key again? I told you to leave it alone.
I was only chatting with friends along the line.
Yeah, well, you keep your nose in your own affairs. Just because Mr. Brooks gave you a raise doesn't mean you're cock of the walk.
Well, I was only trying to learn. Aren't you going to take the message?
No, sir. Not till you promise to leave my key alone.
My boy. As far as I know, there are only 2 people in the whole world who can take a message straight from the key.
Thank you, Mr. Scott.
With the railroad's private line coming in, we can use a fast operator. But I don't suppose a bright boy like you, Andy, could be induced to give up his job.
Well, now, Mr. Scott, that railroad of yours looks mighty interesting from here. What kind of a job would you have in mind?
Young Carnegie impressed Thomas A. Scott with his ability. And when Scott became vice president of the railroad, one of his first acts was to appoint Carnegie as superintendent of its Western Division.
Mr. Carnegie.
Yes, sir?
The porter informed me that you are an official of this railroad. If you have a minute, I'd like to show you something.
I'm always interested in something new. In fact, you could have seen me in my office. What is it?
Well, it's a drawing of the first practical sleeping car ever offered to railroads.
Tell me how it works, Mr.
Woodruff. Theodore T. Woodruff. Well, you divide the car into sections, like...
I just got back from Ohio, Mr. Scott, and I found the answer to one of our biggest problems, a practical sleeping car. Now we can carry passengers overnight in decency and cleanliness. Women, too. It's wonderful.
I've seen every type of sleeping car invention, and not one of them is any good.
But this one is. It's almost perfect. Woodruff, the inventor, has thought out every detail.
Well, you are enthusiastic, Andy. But you may ask the inventor to come here and let me see it.
The success of the sleeping car was immediate. And when Woodruff formed a company to manufacture more of them, he gave Carnegie a 1/8 interest, and thus laid the solid foundation of Carnegie's fortune. Then came the war between the states, the only war in history that Andrew Carnegie thought was justified. He was asked to organize the telegraph service for the Union, and did so with his usual efficiency.
Ah, it's a great sight, isn't it, Andy? All those trains leaving for different destinations.
I've been thinking of the same thing, Mr. Scott. Another destination for myself.
You mean you're thinking of leaving the railroad business?
Exactly. The war should be over in a couple of months. I've been making inquiries into the iron market. The railroads have got to grow. That's going to take iron rails, iron bridges.
But there's big money in railroads. Why, here you are, 27 years old and making $50,000 a year. It's unheard of. Stay with me, Andy. Why, the Vanderbilts, the Goulds, they all see their future in railroads.
It just isn't the money, Mr. Scott. Who knows? Someday I may give it away. I like new fields. I made money with sleeping cars, then oil, then railroad.
And if I know you, Andy, now it'll be iron. Well, good luck.
Thus, Andrew Carnegie resigned from the railroad and went into the iron industry. He and several partners formed the Keystone Bridge Company, which did a large business, replacing the old railroad bridges with new iron spans. Although the company made him a fortune, it was only a few years until Carnegie's foresight brought him to another decision.
Gentlemen, we must convert to steel with the new Bessemer process.
Andy, we're brothers. So I'll feel free to say here what the others might not want to say. You can't come to your partners and say you must do that. The fact is that I, for one, don't see any sense in switching over to steel now.
Why, Tom, and gentlemen, I have no intention of dictating to you, but iron is on the way out. Steel is on the way in. We have to convert to steel or eventually go out of business.
But Andy, the Bessemer process requires a certain kind of ore.
We'll get it.
From an engineering point of view, Andy, steel is much better. But every single steel experiment in America has failed.
If they can make good steel in England, we can make it here in the United States.
But we'll have to compete with all the big iron companies. Why gamble?
I once mortgaged my mother's house in order to invest in an express company. Gentlemen, I can see we have come to a parting of the ways. I don't want to force anything on you. I don't want to persuade you against your better judgment to do anything. But I will say this. You're making a big mistake.
Perhaps the railroad companies won't want to use steel. Why take the risk, Andy?
Steel is the metal of the future. It lasts longer, it's flexible, and I'll find out how to produce it cheaper.
I'm sorry, Andy, but I want no part of it.
In that case, I shall have to form a new company. I already have in mind several excellent men who will come in with me.
Couldn't you do both, Andy? Stay with us and start your steel company, too.
I don't think so. You've heard me say this before. Put all your eggs in one basket, and then watch the basket.
And you've consulted Mother on this project?
As always, Tom. Gentlemen, that's it. And when I drive you out of business, I expect you'll be able to retire on the income from the small partnerships I know you'll want to accept in my new company.
So Carnegie went into steel. Eventually, his brother Thomas and others of his original partners joined him. And in 1881, Andrew and Thomas Carnegie formed Carnegie Brothers Company Limited.
Now that we are Carnegie Brothers at last, Tom, we must begin to expand.
Expand? Good heavens, Andy, we're already the biggest steel producers in the country.
Not an important structure in the country goes up that doesn't have Carnegie steel in it.
It's not enough. We must be self-sufficient. Everything we need must be under our control, especially fuel. I've taken the liberty of inviting Mr. Frick to come in for a chat.
Why, Henry Clay Frick does 80% of the coke business in America. You can't possibly expect...
It is precisely for that reason that I've asked him to come and meet us. I think he'll join our partnership.
Thus, Carnegie made the first big step in the consolidation of the steel business. Then, in 1886, tragedy struck the Carnegie family. Margaret Carnegie, who had remained Andrew's faithful advisor, passed away without knowing that her son Tom had died of pneumonia a few hours before her. It was a bitter blow to Andrew, who was himself a victim of typhoid fever at the time. 5 months after the death of his mother and brother, Carnegie married Louise Whitfield of New York and took her to Scotland to meet all his old friends.
Now that our honeymoon is coming to an end, Lou, I wanted to tell you, you've lifted me to 7th heaven. I could not have faced life without you after Tom and my beloved mother died.
And I've been happy too, Andrew. But tell me, I've always wondered why you picked me, of all the unattached young ladies in America.
My favorite poet rescues me again, Lou. Full many a lady have I eyed with best regard, and many a time the harmony of their tongues hath into bondage brought my too diligent ear. For several virtues have I liked several women, never any of so full soul, but some defect in her did quarrel with the noblest grace she owed and put it to the foil. But you, oh you, so perfect and so peerless, are created of every creature's best.
Oh, Andrew, you and your Shakespeare.
I myself taught the lad his slippery tongue.
Oh, Uncle Lauder, above all people, I've wanted you to meet Louise. Louise, this is Uncle Lauder, Dodd's father. He taught me history, from his own point of view, of course.
It's a great pleasure to meet someone Andy admires so much.
I'm surprised she ever married you, Nig.
I am, too. She put me through the 7 years label like a biblical heroine. But I suffered it, and I won the greatest prize a man ever won. But you didn't come all the way from Dunfermline just to pass judgment on Louise.
Had I seen her before, or heard her voice before, I would have come when you were away. Ah, but you're right. I've come for another reason, too.
Get it off your chest, and then we'll have tea.
I'll be blunt, Nig. You wrote me once you thought it would be a disgrace to die rich. Well, you're over 50 now. You're a very patient man about most things, but this shouldn't wait any longer.
I'm a Scotsman, Uncle Lauder. I'll last. In just a few more years, I'll be able to give up the cares of business and spend the rest of my time golfing, fishing, swimming, and interfering in the affairs of politicians.
I'll ring for tea. You gentlemen go ahead and reminisce. It's the only luxury of age I permit, Andy.
Back in America in 1889, Andrew Carnegie first gave his broad views on philanthropy to the world. He said, a man who becomes rich incurs a debt to society that he must pay back. But Carnegie was not yet ready to devote all his energies to philanthropy. America was growing as never before, becoming a continent of industrial power. The demand was for steel and more steel, and Carnegie moved to meet the challenge.
Gentlemen, this is our position today. With the Thompson Works and our homestead plant here, we are rapidly approaching the place where we should be able to produce steel cheaper than any competitor. I am in favor of withdrawing from the pool and fighting it out independently.
But what if our competitors organize against us? We'd be ruined. I recommend...
Mr. Schwab has worked very hard on this deal. He has a word to say.
Well, our plans on getting Connaught are set. We will now have our own port, and our own railroad will bring in the ore.
What if Rockefeller goes into steel? He already owns the Mesabi Range, controlling most of the ore we need.
I'm pretty sure we can come to an agreement on these terms. We'll lease the ore lands from him. Offer him, say, 25 cents royalties on the ton. We'll use his railroads and his boats at the market price.
Would he agree to that price? It seems low.
Mr. Phipps, these walls might have ears. He will agree, provided we agree to stay away from the Mesabi fields for at least 10 years, not to buy up any ore land on our own. Gentlemen, do you know what this will do? It will eliminate Mr. Rockefeller as a competitor in steel.
After the creation of the country's largest steel business, Carnegie decided to sell out. However, it was not until 1901 that a man came along who was capable of concentrating financial resources sufficient to buy out Carnegie.
I think I have that deal all lined up with J.P. Morgan.
Good.
With his company's producing finished products and your company producing raw steel, Morgan ought to have the greatest steel combine ever seen in the history of the world, if he can buy you out.
What's his offer?
Well, he won't accept either your evaluation of $25 million or the speculator's evaluation of $400 million. He said, I'll offer $250 million to Carnegie.
That's just for my holdings. Don't forget the other associates must be bought out also. That will require another $150 million almost.
Well, he understands that all right.
Good. Good work, Schwab. It looks as though Mr. Morgan and I are going to be doing business.
And so, Andrew Carnegie, poverty-stricken son of a poverty-stricken family, sold out his business interest to J.P. Morgan. Carnegie took his wife and baby daughter to Scotland and established a home at Skibo Castle, where he devoted his time to golfing, fishing, politics, and giving away his fortune.
Oh, hello, Lou.
You seem tired, Andrew.
I am. Giving money away is harder than making it in the first place. At least if you want to do something worthwhile with it.
Why do you burden yourself with all this work? Surely you can pay other men to do it for you.
Yes. I've been thinking of setting up a foundation. But there's so much to do. So many worthy things that need attention and money.
But you can't do everything, Andrew.
I know. I know. It's fortunate that I've a lot of patience. You'd think it would be easy to give money away. Well, never mind. I've several things to take care of.
All your friends are waiting, Andrew. Morley's here, the Blaines. They're waiting for you to have lunch.
I'll be along directly, dear. And I think I'll have a little present for Morley. The Acton Library.
He'll be so pleased, dear.
A few minutes more and the papers will be in order on that Mount Wilson Observatory. Then I'll have luncheon, and then we'll take the afternoon off. Shall we ride out in the coach this afternoon?
That would be fine, dear. And then this evening you can dictate a little more on your autobiography.
Andrew Carnegie gave money to 500 universities, colleges, and institutions, thousands of library buildings, an endowment for international peace, and many other projects, all benefited from Carnegie's gospel of wealth. In all, he gave away over $200 million. In August 1919, his last years blighted by the recent war in Europe, Andrew Carnegie died. His best epitaph is that of his friend Elihu Root, who said, he belonged to that great race of nation builders who have made the development of America the wonder of the world. Wealth had brought him no hardening of the heart, nor made him forget the dreams of his youth.